Hello, my name is Beck and I am the Engagement Manager at Greenfleet. We're going to have a bit of a chat today about one of the biggest things in climate news for a while, which is COP26, the UN's climate change conference happening in Glasgow right now. So I'm going to get Wayne Wescott, who is our CEO, to join us so that he can have a chat to us about everything that's happening over there at the moment. Let's just get Wayne to join. We'll both be joining you from Wurundjeri country today, and we acknowledge that the Wurundjeri people are the traditional owners of this land and pay respects to their elders, both past and present, and any that may be joining us today. Hi Wayne, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Beck. It's beautiful in post-lockdown Melbourne to be here and seeing you at least on the screen again.
It is nice to have some eased restrictions happening around us after so long in lockdown. Now, COP26 is happening right now. So to start, can you give us a bit of an overview of what COP is?
Yes, COP, the Conference of Parties, COP, has been, this is number 26. So every year the global community gets together to try to work out how we can have collective action on climate change. Now I have to say my first COP was COP4. So I have been around, I'm a very old man, Beck, I had to tell you. I've been around a long time talking to COPs. I was at Paris and Copenhagen, which were pretty big milestones in the past. And I think it showed to me how difficult it is to get the global community together to agree to take collective action. And I don't want to say we shouldn't do that, but just how hard it is. It's been a very difficult process. Every year we go through this. Every year we push hard that this is, the important milestone. But I think it'd be fair to say that there's something in the air at the moment around COP26, which is that this is really important with Joe Biden taking over as president. So US is back in. A lot of global tensions post-COVID, or at least coming out, learning to live with COVID. These are big milestones for our global community, and climate change is now the big crisis we have to deal with.
Yeah. So COP will run for 2 weeks. So we're in the first few days at the moment.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what sort of happens in the first week and the second week?
Yeah, well, generally the first week is a lot of posturing, a lot of announcements, a lot of sessions, a lot of new technologies, a lot of announcements, and then the second week politicians tend to focus on the detail. Now, as I understand it, the text is already being negotiated. So the politicians were there much earlier this time, which is great. So the way global texts are dealt with is an endless debate around alternative texts, which is why the endpoint feels very mild and muted to those of us who aren't in the room. But to get countries with diametrically opposed interests to agree to a text is very difficult. It's a consensus model. So it's not a majority model, a consensus model. And there's some deep structural issues that persist not only in climate change, biodiversity, the World Health Organization's gone ripping through the middle of it as well. These are structural issues to do with what used to be called developed countries. I'm not quite up with the latest appropriate way to refer to that break, but certainly between countries whose economies are still trying to deliver electricity to people, like in India, and countries like ours, which don't have that issue. So Friday next week, I think, is the last day. Typically, there's a mad rush at the end because they're desperate for a communique that is seen as successful. There's a lot of egos on the line, but there's also a lot of usually money and focus and influence. But and there'll be a lot of spinning by the various organisations around all of this. So it seems like a theatre from outside, and in some sense there's a theatre of the UN in all of this. But at the same time, this is really important for all of us. And it's easy to get cynical and think, oh, well, this is just the UN. It's not. It's very important discussions being taken about the future of our planet. Great.
And what, for yourself, do you think are the most important sort of takeaways that have come out of the first few days?
Well, it's been, I'm sure all of the people watching this have been absolutely overwhelmed by the information that's coming out. And I don't want to add to your overwhelming feeling, but if I can cut through to where I see a couple of things, because I think one of the dangers of social media is that there's a lot of spinning, and I think that's a real problem. Firstly, there's the politics and ambition debate. That's the big one that always underpins COPs, which is that we need countries to be taking stands that will commit them through legislation to significant emission reductions. That's the key focus, as always, with climate change, emission reductions. And I think the fact that, you know, both President Xi and Putin from China and Russia aren't there, are not attending, is a real loss, I think. I think that's a real loss. And it says a lot about the theatre of the UN that personal face-to-face interactions are really important. So that's a sadness, and I think that goes with both of those countries, but indeed all of the large emitters really struggling to deal with this issue of, in a post-COVID environment, how are they going to manage this reduction? And I think President Biden has said recently that he's urging an increase in oil production, even though he's looking for a phase out over time now. I understand the logic of that and the strategy, but I think, you know, for most of us, this is just not going to work at all. So the politics is not working for the ambition at the moment. And early on, now it's early days, Beck, I have to say, so things can happen. Things do happen, and there are changes of mind. I think we're all surprised by India's decision to become net zero by 2070. Now, that might seem a long way away and isn't really science-based, but given the specific constraints in India, that may not be a bad thing. Let's see how that rolls out over the next couple of days. So I think politics, ambition, setup of the theatre is not looking great at the moment. Secondly, there's been a lot about offsetting, which of course is what Greenfleet does. There's been a lot about the politics of offsetting. And I think, you know, we're clear at Greenfleet that offsetting is not a license to pollute. Offsetting is something we do after we've taken climate action in other spheres. And our supporters, the wonderful individuals who support us, the wonderful companies that work with us, know that as well. That's something that we emphasise, that we all take action in all the parts of our lives, and then we offset what we can't reduce to zero. But it would be fair to say that there's been some pretty bad publicity about some of the offsetting methodologies. I have to say I have real concerns about some of the avoided deforestation, about some of the ways of the framing of soil carbon, although soil carbon itself may be a very powerful thing, and Greenfleet's exploring that in relationship to regenerative farming, so on a smaller scale. And I think that's a powerful next phase of sustainability, and happy to talk to anyone about that. We're very keen on that. Blue carbon as well, also very hyped hard. And you know, there's some issues around permanency and tenure, but these are all ways to try to work with our ecosystems to help our ecosystems thrive in the long run in a new environment. So I think offsetting, but the trouble is, there's offsettings also, people make money out of it. We're a not-for-profit, of course, a charity. That's not our focus. Our focus is climate action and having as much as we can. And inevitably, we get tarred with that brush. And that's annoying, but understandable. But I think it's important that we constantly restate the message that offsetting is a very important transition strategy over the coming couple of decades. Over those couple of decades, that offsetting will help us do the transition from large-scale fossil fuels to renewables. And it can't happen tomorrow, sadly. It's just the way the world is. So it's very important that we are able to use that offsetting in a way that also sets up, as we do, to restore ecosystems protected for the rest of the century. And I think lastly, it would be fair to say, Beck, that there's been, you know, as an Australian at the COP over the years, it's been a bit of an up and down ride, if I could put it that way. There's been some good times and there's been some not so good times. I have to say, you know, Australia, as probably our viewers will know, Australia was voted the fossil of the day, which is a daily award given for organisations or countries. I'm not sure whether it's organisations and countries. I think it's both, in terms of seen to be obstacles to global consensus on these issues. And that's not an award we want to win. We want to win some awards, but not that one. And I think what that shows is that the public policy debate in Australia is absolutely stuck, and upsettingly stuck. And I think we need to hope, cross fingers, that there'll be some movement forward in the next couple of days. There's some great stories to tell about what normal Australians like our supporters are doing on the ground, above and beyond whatever the government's saying we should be doing, which is inadequate. There's some good stories as well. I'm sure some of our NGOs over there are telling those stories as well, and putting pressure on policymakers too. So for all of that, I think Australian progress, you'd have to mark it down. It's pretty low at the moment. You never say never in this sort of world, and especially in the UN theatre, anything can happen. There can be breakthroughs, and so let's cross fingers that the personal interactions between leaders will help move the dial a bit further on the Australian public policy approach.
Great, thank you. I think it's, like you said, there is so much information that's coming out about COP, and everyone's inboxes and Twitter feeds and everything is really overloaded with it. So we hope that by doing videos like this, we can help cut through that a little bit and bring forward some of the most important things that are coming out of the conference. And so our plan over the next couple of weeks is to do these regularly. So 10:30 on Wednesdays, Fridays and next Monday, we'll jump on here, Wayne and I, and Wayne will talk through some of the information that's coming out of there. And we do hope that over the next sort of 10 days, we do see some really productive talks coming out of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share at the moment, Wayne?
No, I think Beck, your point is a good one to take. So often at the beginning of these sessions, the bracketed text seems impossible. The politics seems a nightmare. The outside groups, I noticed Greta Thunberg on the outside, which is kind of crazy, really, isn't it, when you have someone of that stature? So you have all of that happening on the outside, and you have the inside. It seems difficult, but everything is a little notch towards something. We just don't know how fast that's going to go. And I think it's wise to stay optimistic, or at least hopeful, through this process, to see where we can get and what we can get from this whole process.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Wayne. If you have any questions about COP26, please send them through to us and we will try to address them in our next live. But otherwise, we'll see you at 10:30 on Friday.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, Beck. See ya.
Bye.